I want you to get together.
Vodou is an odd blend of Freemasonry, French
Mhm.
Catholicism, and African ancestor spirit worship, all kind of
Yeah.
blended together into one odd mix. And it's because obviously African slaves were brought over by the French Catholics, and Freemasonry was like a dominant part of that whole colonization attempt as well. And it seems
Wow.
like
Yeah.
these African, which became French African slaves, were obviously kind of adapted to all of that and incorporated a lot of the iconography of Catholicism and the icon worship of Catholicism with the rituals of
Yes.
Freemasonry and attached to
Yeah.
it their veneration of their ancestor spirits. It's why
Crazy.
Papa Legba or Baron Samedi wears a black top hat, for example.
Yeah.
It's the Grand Master of a lodge it's trying to copy there, and it's just it's so odd, and it does seem like they are all about witchcraft and, like I said,
Mhm.
imbuing icons or items with particular spirits for the purposes of
Yeah.
curses and to gain power and strength and all sorts of things. And yeah, thanks for sharing that
Yep.
story. Absolutely, and I think I may have to get you on another time or just privately ask you a lot
uh,
more about what happened there. Um,
for sure. Well, and
'cause-
you gotta take into the consideration too the water spirits, which
mhm.
is part of that whole ancestral stuff too. They very much believe in the water spirits. You can call it the marine kingdom or what have you too. Which I think tie into some of those ancient rituals of their ancestors, the familiar spirits kind of being passed down. But yeah,
Mhm.
I remember you and I talked about that a little bit on when I interviewed you. It was fascinating
Sure.
what you brought.
Would you
Yeah.
mind right now expounding on the water spirit connection? That sounds really interesting.
Oh yeah. So you can call it the marine kingdom or the water kingdom, but really what it is, I mean, it goes back to the Bible, right? They were worshiping these underwater, and we don't know what's under the water. I mean, think about it. It hasn't even, the majority of the ocean has barely even been mapped. And
True.
so you think back to even the worship of Dagon, the fish gods, and you have Neptune and all these Poseidon and all these ancient gods of old that they deified. And I believe many of them were probably demonic principalities or fallen angels of sorts that they were trying to deify. But um, as you move forward into like the Caribbean or water type, even the African cultures, they really put a lot of emphasis on the water kingdom. And there's I can't think of her name right now that they call her Mami Wata is a big one, and they will summon up. They believe in mermaids even there.
Yeah.
And there's certain places that you will not go. They tell you do not go there in Haiti, where they believe that the mermaid spirits will take people. They believe in it so much, and it makes sense. They live on the water. They do water rituals, ritual cleansing, going in the water. I would even venture to say I didn't see, but I would even venture to say sacrificing in the water. A
Hmm.
lot of crazy stuff happens with the water, and it kind of spills over into America. And I shared a lot about this on my page, and people were like, "Oh, you're crazy." I'm like, "You guys have no idea. In America, people like they just they don't see the spiritual realm the way other countries do. Um, it's just very different, their culture. And so Haiti is no different. I mean, they believe in these water spirits, they believe in the fish gods, mermaids, sirens, all the like, and they will do sacrifices and rituals and worship them.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds it.
Yeah,
It's odd when you were talking about the mermaids there. So they would pull people down and basically
pull them
murder them.
down.
That's actually
Yeah.
identical to the stories of the mermaids in Australia as well. They have the same myth, that
Wow.
these well, they have loads of horrible monsters, which are both spiritual and physical in a very strange, etheric way,
Yeah.
a lot like the African Vodou ancestors view it all. The way they view the
Right.
world is not like a Western views the world. They are
Right.
completely in communication with spirits 24/7, and they see them as just as real and physical as humans. It's very odd. But they talk about how
Absolutely.
there are these mermaid fish women which will literally just, if you get too close to the water, they'll whip you under and drown you and eat you alive. It's just that simple. That's what they do. So
Yeah.
and they have these other ones, these other strange creatures as well in the salt lakes. And
Oh, yeah.
if you wander in the salt lakes for too long and get weak, hands will just come out of the ground and grab you and pull you under. Because
Wow.
then
It's
it's these
crazy.
cannibalistic, really white-skinned, pale, odd monsters type thing, and it's just, and they have these flying monsters as well. And but when you were just talking about the water spirits and their versions, it sounds pretty similar to obviously an island
Yeah.
which is thousands of miles away with a completely different Aboriginal culture. But when it comes to the
Right.
spirits, the modus operandi always seems to be the same. So I'm gonna have to look into.
Yeah.
I've heard the Marine Kingdom so many times, that
Yeah.
phrase, but I will admit it's
Yes.
not something I've actually ever gone into. But it's
Yeah. Well, I did a really deep, I guess you would call it a dive study to try to tie it back to the Bible, and I actually did a workshop on it. And it's amazing when you start to see the verses that talk about even crossing the Red Sea, even Leviathan. Um, you know how Jesus walked on the water and he tamed the water. There's so much deeper symbolism and meaning there. It's not only taking control over his creation, but because some of these cultures worshiped, you think about Jonah going down in the whale and he
mm,
came up and this whale spit him out. Well, that would have been very, very impactful for people that were worshiping fish gods.
yeah.
Hello. And so these people were worshiping these things, even in, the Old Testament times, these pagan religions. And so when you start to see that there's so much more that is rooted into the Bible,
Hmm.
it's just like, wow, like, who am I to say that this stuff isn't real? You know what I mean? Like, my mind has been blown over the years, and I've seen actual, not water spirits, but I've seen and had personal accounts and stories with people throughout the years that, the spiritual realm is something that, as you know, Paul, it's, you know, it's unimaginable at times. Like, you just
Hmm.
can't really fathom, that could
Yeah.
happen, but
So
it does.
is there an element to the whole idea of water? And obviously, we are this. What do they say? We're 70% water or something like that. Is that what they say about
Mhm.
humans? I don't know. But it's the idea as
Right.
well as water can be reflective like a mirror. And in a way, I feel like I'm thinking of Stargate Atlantis here. You know, that watery effect when the portal opens, that thing that comes out. And I'm thinking like, it is water considered to these people like a portal of a sort? Like you're going into another realm when you go
Mm.
into the water, and in a very literal sense, not just going underwater. But it's kind of like I don't know. Have you heard anything about
Yeah.
that? My synapses are firing here, and I'm just wondering if
Yeah,
if that
I
relates.
love that. No, I actually think I have. When you said that, something kind of sparked in my memory. I can't remember, but and you think about the alchemical reasons, and you think about the elemental parts of water and fire and earth. You see that in pagan religions and in witchcraft and stuff. And so
Hmm.
I wouldn't doubt that there is something about the water that is utilized as kind of moving into a perhaps portal or different dimension of sorts. I mean, I've heard some pretty far out stories. I don't know if your listeners are or you're familiar with Dan Duvall, but he has this ministry called Bride Ministries, and he works with SRA, satanic ritual abuse survivors, and who have been through traumatic things, and they talk about this kind of stuff. Like, they will say there's a portaling effect to water.
Hmm.
um I mean, that stuff's crazy if you guys want to go down. I mean, I believe him. I believe that a lot of those stories are true. But yeah, and so
Yeah, certainly. Just thinking again, another thing about water there. Is I was reminded of a story I've been telling quite a lot recently because it's just my book took me there for my research. But it's about dragons. And
yeah,
I have this theory and this rumination, this speculation I've kind of made a few times that, biblically speaking, I feel like obviously the seraphim are fiery flying serpents. So there is a class of angel that could be defined as a dragon. That seems to
yeah,
be their animalistic form of some kind. And angels can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and types of animals, like the living creatures with four heads, like different animals, and the wheels and the thrones and all sorts of things, and the cherubim. But it seems like the seraphim are, you could say they were some kind of serpent, a fiery,
yeah,
flying, feathered serpent thing or something. And you see these serpents all over the earth in different cultures, like the rainbow serpent, for example, of Australia, which carves the mountains with its body, or you have Leviathan in the Bible. Actually, it's probably a good example of this now I think
Right.
about it, which is is a sea serpent, is it not? Is Leviathan or something like
Yeah.
that? And then you have obviously in America the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl,
Yep.
and you have dragons all throughout Europe. It's like dragon, King George slayed a dragon, all these type of things. And then in China, you have the dragons, which were literally servants of the Jade Emperor, or God. It's an analogy for God and his angels. It's the Jade Emperor and his dragons. And
Yeah.
there's a story from China which is very fascinating, and it involves painting the god as a terrible person, basically. So, from my research, it's like the rebellious angels created a Gnostic mythos back in the day to create the culture of China, which goes against God in a way and idolizes and glorifies the dragons as the saviors, the angels as the saviors. And in this story, the people are dying of thirst. There's a severe drought, and the dragons, the
Yeah.
sea, who belong to the sea, witness this. Okay, and they're
Hmm.
like, "Why does the Jade Emperor not send rain? We should. The people are suffering. We should go and ask him to help them." So the dragons
Yeah.
go up to the Jade Emperor and leave the water, and the Jade Emperor said to them, "Why have you left where I said you should be?" You know, and
Hmm.
that implies there that God created angels to be in specific geographical locations to make sure things are working properly, or
Yeah.
or even possibly to be the cog in the machine that is quite literally the thing that works, like the water. So it's this idea that
Right.
perhaps everything is conscious in a way because everything is alive, and things like lakes and rivers and the seas are conscious angels in their own right, and maybe an intrinsic part of creation is what I was getting from these stories and these ideas. It's not that they made creation, God created
Right.
them. It's that they serve a purpose in God's creation. But these water dragons, basically asked the Jade Emperor to bring rain. He's like, yeah, leave it with me, I'll sort it out. He's distracted. He's distracted by something. Some guy's playing some music or something in his court. So the dragons leave and wait, and nothing happens. So they go back and they see that the Jade Emperor is just distracted and busy being a fool, and not really caring about the people, just
Yeah.
enjoying being rich and having all the power, but not really helping anybody. So the dragons say, "Well, why don't we just make it rain?"
Right.
We're water elements, are we not? So they do that,
Yep.
and it says that they spit water into the air from the sea and let it fall on the people, and the people get the rain. But then the Jade Emperor is furious with them, and he chains them all up, these four dragons, and puts them under a mountain each. And then from those mountains, rivers spring, and that makes up the four rivers that run through China today. That's the mythos behind it. But it's kind of the idea
Wow.
that entities are linked to geographic locations in a very
Yes.
specific way. And you're there talking about the water kingdom, and then
Yeah.
then obviously they're like animistic representations of angels. The Greek pantheons had, and the Romans, they had more of an anthropomorphic analogy for the angels. So you get, Poseidon with his trident, for example, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the god of the sea, should we say, or something like that. And
Right.
yeah, so I'm just seeing these analogies all over the place, different myths, and in my brain it was just firing like 1,000 things a minute there. So I kind of had to share that with you. But yeah, the Water Kingdom.
Yeah. Love it.
I'm gonna have
Well,
to go
and
ahead.
you
Sorry.
right. Well, you think about like the Ugaritic texts and like the seven up Kalus and all these kind of origins, how they believe like the world was created. And a lot of these old ancient religions believe that they were created from the waters, like
Mm,
the I can't think of the big mystic river, right? They'll call it, or and so there's such a deeper, mysterious connection to the waters that I think that we just don't know, but there's enough there to say there is something,
hmm.
it's mysterious. It's interesting to me. It gets my mind kind of firing too. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
No, and I think there's one more that comes to mind now is the Dogon tribes of Africa, which are quite an
Mm,
isolated tribe that kind of survived the onslaught of Islamic invasion and conversion. So they still kind of have that really old ancestor spirit worship religion going on there that's not been, I suppose, edited or changed by any colonization attempts. And they believe that a fish god came down from heaven, fell from heaven, and landed in the water near them, the river and the lake. And they communicated
yeah.
with this fish god, and it taught them everything they know. and it taught them some really
Yeah.
obscure knowledge about Sirius B and a specific star cluster in the skies, which is invisible to the naked eye without a telescope or something like that. And they knew all about supposed planets and things like this. It's been on the History Channel to no end. It's one of those type of topics, like a mainstream conspiracy topic, you know. And
Yeah.
even the TV's covered this one for ancient aliens, you know, all this type of thing. But it's just these tales abound. So yeah, sorry, a bit of a tangent there, but
Yeah.
that's still just fascinating
It
information.
was a good tangent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
fascinating. And it ties back to like just really quickly, it ties back to all the movies. It's everything that they show us. And I think, would be remiss if we didn't look at that. Like they're
Hmm.
showing us the Little Mermaid and the this and the that, sirens, and there's something there. So yeah,
Yeah,
pretty cool, pretty interesting.
wasn't there a film called The Shape of Water? And
I think so. Was
wasn't
it
that
horror
about?
film?
I think it was about a woman falling in love with a human fish hybrid or something like that.
Oh
It's
gosh.
a love
Sounds about
story.
right.
I think between a woman and like a fish man, finding love
Oh
against
wow.
all odds or something like that against a world who rejects them. So, I don't know.
That sounds about right.
It's funny because we're talking about human hybrids in the media. They really actually have been pushing that quite a lot recently. I've noticed a huge
Yeah.
uptick in hybrid themed Netflix shows and things like that. And I think
Yeah.
they were doing a stunt to promote it, where a woman was going around with a pram, and the baby in the pram, which sat up and was making all this noise, was like an animatronic, creepy looking,
Oh.
uncanny creepy. But it was a half bird, half human. It was covered in feathers and had a beak, but it also had human features. And it was like people were
Oh
walking past
wow.
it thinking it was real, and it was getting their reactions, you know. And they've naturally
Yeah.
chosen all the people who are like, "Oh, it's cute," you know. "Oh, yeah." People just think you're
Yeah.
people just think you're different, and they're just scared because they don't understand you, you know, and all this type of stuff. And it's kind of what in the predictive programming is this? Is all I could think when I saw that. I'm like,
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
yeah, just
Exactly.
so that's something to keep an eye on.
I want you to get together.